Have you ever just looked around at our modern world and wondered why, with all the amazing tech and connections we have, it can still feel so stressful? Or just plain weird? Well, it turns out the answer might be hiding deep inside our own heads, in our evolutionary past. Okay, let's dive into this and explore the fascinating and kinda crazy mismatch between our ancient brains and the very modern problems they face every single day.
And we're going to kick things off with a real head-scratcher. It's a finding from a major study that seems to flip everything we think we know about happiness completely upside down. Why is it that for some of the most intelligent people out there, having more friends and a busy social life is actually linked to being less happy? It makes no sense, right? Let's find out.
To really get this, you have to wrap your head around one core idea. There's basically an ancient ghost living inside our modern minds. Our brains, you see, evolved over thousands and thousands of years for a world that looks absolutely nothing like the one we live in today. And that creates some pretty interesting and sometimes really problematic side effects.
There's a name for this. It's called the Savanna principle, and it's the key to this whole puzzle. All it really means is that our brains are hardwired to see and react to the world as if we were still hunter-gatherers out on the African savanna. That programming just doesn't always mesh with life in the 21st century. Here's the best way to think about it. Our brain is running this incredibly powerful, but very, very old piece of software. It was perfectly designed for the world of, say, 10,000 BC. But now we're trying to run that same software on the modern hardware of skyscrapers, social media, and a global economy. And yeah, sometimes you're going to get some serious glitches.
So, what did that ancestral world even look like? Well, a really key piece of the puzzle suggests our brains are built for a social world of about 150 people. You might have heard of this, it's called Dunbar's number. It's the size of ancient hunter-gatherer groups, early farming villages, even modern military units. It seems to be the cognitive limit, the max number of people we can really know and keep stable relationships with.
Okay, so armed with this Savanna principle, researchers decided to test how our ancient wiring deals with two huge, unavoidable parts of modern life. First, the insane density of our cities, and second, the way we do friendships. And what they found? Well, it's pretty mind-blowing.
So, first up, population density. I mean, we've all felt this, right? You can be surrounded by literally millions of people but feel completely and totally alone, or just stressed out of your mind. And studies even show urban dwellers' brains react more intensely to stress. The Savanna Theory says, well, yeah, our brains just weren't designed for groups bigger than 150, let alone 15 million.
Now, just as you'd expect, living in a dense city was on average linked with being less happy. But here's the wild twist. For people with lower intelligence, happiness is way higher in rural areas. See that tall light gray bar on the left? But in the city, the opposite is true. The more intelligent folks, that's the black bar on the right, actually report being more satisfied. So the takeaway here is that intelligence seems to act like a buffer, helping people handle the totally unnatural stress of city life.
All right, let's pivot to the second puzzle, friendship. And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? We all just know, deep down, that friends are crucial for a happy life. Back in our ancestral past, having close allies was literally a matter of life and death. You needed them for hunting, for protection, for everything. But how does that instinct play out today? And this graph, this perfectly illustrates the most shocking finding of the whole study. For most people, the logic holds. Socializing more with friends equals more happiness. You can see that in the first set of bars on the left. The light gray bar for more friends is higher. But now look at the highly intelligent people on the right. For them, the black bar, representing less socializing, is way, way higher. For them, hanging out with friends more often is actually linked to being less happy. The effect is totally flipped on its head.
So what on earth is going on here? Well, the theory suggests that general intelligence itself might have evolved specifically as a tool to solve new problems. Things our ancestors never, ever had to deal with. And living happily in a city of millions, or thriving without a super tight-knit group of friends, those are brand new problems. It seems more intelligent people might just have an easier time adapting to these new social rules, which means they don't rely as heavily on that ancient need for constant social contact.
Okay, so we've seen how our brain's ancient hardware can kind of short-circuit in the modern world. But what about the software we run on it every single day? This brings us to the energy that fuels our focus and our self-control, and to a huge scientific debate about something we all feel, willpower.
Oh, you know this feeling. You've had a brutal day at work, you resisted the urge to eat that extra cookie, you made a million tiny decisions, and by the time you get home, you feel like you have absolutely zero mental gas left in the tank.
Well, that universal feeling is at the center of a very popular, but now very controversial theory in psychology.
It's called ego depletion, and the idea is beautiful because it's so simple. Your willpower, your self-control, it's like a battery. Every time you make a choice, or force yourself to focus, or manage your emotions, you use up a little bit of that limited mental juice.
This became known as the strength model of willpower because it literally compares self-control to a muscle. You use it, it gets tired. The classic experiment is simple. You make someone do a tough mental task, they supposedly use up their willpower, and then their performance on a second, totally unrelated task gets worse. For decades, this was just accepted as fact in psychology.
But here's the thing about science. It never stops questioning. And over the last decade or so, this really intuitive idea of ego depletion got put on trial big time. Scientists started asking a simple question. If this effect is so real and so powerful, where's the proof? And that's where the whole story started to unravel. When research labs all over the world tried to repeat those original ego depletion experiments, a whole lot of them failed. A huge, coordinated study with multiple labs found that the effect was tiny if it even existed at all, leading many to wonder if this whole thing was just a mirage.
The critiques started piling up. Scientists found what they call a file drawer problem. Basically, a bias where only the studies that found the effect got published, while the failures were hidden away. They also realized that something as simple as motivation could make the whole effect disappear. Just offer someone a small reward, and suddenly their depleted willpower comes roaring back. On top of that, a lot of the original experiments just weren't very well designed.
This led to the next logical step. Okay, if willpower is a real physical resource in the brain, like a little tank of glucose or something, then we should be able to actually see it getting used up with tools like fMRI. It was time to go look for the hard neurological evidence.
And what the brain scan showed was, well, it was messy. The original theory predicted we'd see one single general resource just draining away. But that's not what the brain scan showed at all. The changes in brain activity were often very specific to the task at hand, not general. Some studies found less activation in one brain area, but more activation in another, almost like the brain was compensating. The simple story of a draining battery just didn't hold up.
So let's step back and pull these two huge ideas together. On one hand, we've got this ancient Savanna-tuned brain trying its best to make sense of a world it was never built for. And on the other hand, the very mechanics of the mental energy we use to get through the day are way more complicated than we ever imagined. What does all this really tell us about ourselves?
Here's the bottom line. Our minds are not simple. They're these ancient machines, shaped by a deep evolutionary past that explains some of our weirdest modern behaviors. And at the same time, the fundamental rules of how our minds even operate, like willpower, are so much more complex and nuanced than a simple metaphor. We're literally still drawing the map.
So we're left with this really powerful idea. Your brain is this incredible, complicated device, full of ancient ghosts and running on systems we are just now beginning to figure out. So when you think about your own life, your own happiness, your own focus, what's the next puzzle you want to solve about that amazing, modern mind you carry around with you every